So Judge Torres, who is residing over the Ripple versus the SEC case, has just changed some timeframes that both Ripple and the SEC had previously agreed upon. What does this do for the case? Well, it could speed things up. So in this video, I'm going to tell you about what she did without the SEC or Ripple's consent and how much it could actually speed up the case by. I'm going to tell you what our favorite outside attorney, Jeremy Hogan, just said about it. Also, there is a litigation analyst that works for Bloomberg who thinks the SEC is going to beat Ripple in this case. So I'm going to tell you about who this analyst is and what Brad Garlinghouse's reaction was when he actually heard this news. Because it seems like somebody's not exactly paying attention to what's been going on. Also, we're going to talk about what is going on in the world of tech stocks, because there is yet another one that took a really tough hit after a bad earnings report. We now have major tech stocks that have tanked in the last couple of months, and we have a couple of more to add to this list. Also, I'm going to talk a little bit about global inflation and what that could be doing to the macro factors of the crypto market and Bitcoin. Hey everyone, my name is Randy and welcome back to the Late Night Grind. Right now on this channel we are covering Ripple versus the SEC case, but I'm also covering cryptocurrency news, investment markets, and personal finance. So if any or all these topics interest you, make sure you hit that subscribe button and join the Late Night Grind community. Also, if you do three things, I'd appreciate it. Smash the thumbs up button, watch this video all the way to the end, and check out my Patreon link in the description below. Alright guys, let's jump into it. So let's first talk about this senior litigation analyst who works for Bloomberg Financial, who as of a couple of months ago has recently said that he believes that the SEC is going to beat Ripple. Now, I actually looked at the article in question in which he actually stated this. His name is Elliot Stein, and there's been a bunch of people, including John Deaton, Jeremy Hogan, and some others on Twitter who have been, offering to debate this guy about what's going on in the case. So back in February, there were some documents that Ripple was actually pushing to get unsealed. Well, those documents were the legal documents, the legal analysis that Ripple had received back in 2013 from the law firm Perkins Coie, who was giving them guidance on whether or not XRP may or may not be considered a security. Now, they actually got several documents from Perkins Coie back in 2013. The final one stating that, according to Perkins Coie, it does not appear that XRP would fit the analysis of a security, but that the SEC may feel differently. Well, because of these documents, it was actually back in February that this Bloomberg legal analyst said, it looks like the SEC is going to win because that goes in favor of the SEC, not in favor of Ripple. Well, I disagree, along with many other people who've been following this case, including John Deaton, who's actually going after the SEC. So Brad Garlinghouse, the CEO of Ripple, was in an interview on Bloomberg TV just the other day. And the host of this interview brought up the fact that their senior litigation analyst, he believes that this case is going to go in favor of the SEC. And Brad Garlinghouse, he looked pretty shocked, honestly. Raised his eyebrows and just kind of nodded his head. He seems to know what's going on a lot more than the host does. But then the interesting comment after that was he said that Ripple is actually operating as if they had already lost the case. So their business, what they're doing abroad, all their hiring that they're doing abroad, they're essentially acting like, they can't do anything inside of the United States. And this is quite obscene for those that support innovation inside the United States. So nonetheless, John Deaton actually offered up a debate over who actually has an advantage right now, and that it's highly doubtful that the SEC is actually going to win this one. I highly doubt this senior litigation analyst for Bloomberg spent a whole lot of time reading these documents or even following along with the rest of this case. He might have a different conclusion. Now, before I get on to the rest of the Ripple versus the SEC case in terms of the time frames that may have now just changed, I wanted to jump into what is going on in the stock market, because tech stocks and NASDAQ, they are just getting hammered. And there's another one we can add to the list that had a huge earnings drawback and thus had a huge stock crash. That being Amazon. It had a big time whiff on its earnings. That, along with Robinhood, the online trading app, who recently said they lost 1.8 million active users. Well, even though their crypto numbers are up, the rest of their active user base is not good, and so they are getting hammered as well. So we can add these two companies to the list of PayPal, Peloton, Netflix, Facebook, Zoom, and now Amazon and Robinhood. Well, what do they all have in common? These are the companies that absolutely exploded when COVID first hit and everyone was essentially stuck in their homes. Well, these stocks exploded, and guess what? Now that they're not hitting their earnings marks, this was bound to happen. And I'm sure some of the financial analysts that saw this coming managed to set up their shorts before this actually happened, at least if they're smart. But nonetheless, there is a lot of red candles heading straight down, specifically within the NASDAQ. But the one thing I wanted to touch on was how the global economic factors are not only being affected by this, but how Bitcoin and the crypto market are. Because as of right now, everybody in the world, every country in the world is facing crazy inflation. And the United States is no different. 8.5% inflation. It's the worst in 40 years. But it's not exactly the worst. In fact, there's many countries that are far worse off than the United States is right now. In fact, I'm just going to rattle off a list. China is up 61%, Argentina 55%, Brazil 11.3%, Russia 16.7%, Venezuela 284%. And so the US at 8.5%, yes, that's bad. That's terrible, in fact. But judging by how the rest of the world is going, this is what's propping up the United States dollar. The fact that there's many other fiat currencies that are not doing well, the United States dollar is doing well. In fact, it's pushing up against a 5-year resistance line right now at about 103. So this is something I'm keeping track of because this seems to play into what the Bitcoin and crypto markets do, because obviously we know Bitcoin and crypto are global, they're worldwide. And so as people continue to buy into this narrative that it's a hedge against inflation, that it is a place to store your buying power, and it's not confiscatable by government, at least if you're doing it properly. Well, some of the analysts that I watch tend to think that in the coming months, this could be one of the biggest catalysts for a Bitcoin boom. Prepare accordingly. All right, now let's get into the Ripple versus the SEC case and the timing that just now came out. Actually, just yesterday, Judge Annalisa Torres, who is residing over this case along with Judge Knepper, recently amended and put forth her own timeframes for this case. Now, if you remember from one of my previous videos that I talked about, both Ripple and the SEC agreed on a certain time frame. And that last time frame, December 20th of the end of this year, was essentially going to be the deadline for all summary judgment motion briefings to be submitted. Well, Judge Torres said, nah, it's not going to happen like that. It's going to be November 15th. That's big because that puts it over a month ahead of schedule than what the previous timeline said. And Jeremy Hogan, who was shocked by this, along with Attorney Bill, along with James Filan, along with some of the other attorneys on Twitter, and they said this kind of came out of left field. This kind of came out of nowhere because both of these judges have been going on with the timeframes that the SEC and Ripple have been setting the whole time. But being pushed up 1 month, Jeremy Hogan said this. He said this can only mean one thing, that Judge Torres wants to see this wrapped up, possibly a settlement, before Christmas. So if you're looking for a potential time frame, this is one of the biggest key indicators we have seen in months in terms of when this case could possibly wrap up. So if you want to follow along with this story or any of the other topics that I cover on this channel, make sure you subscribe to the Late Night Grind YouTube channel. And if you're new to this channel, also check out the community tab. I put polls up there. You can go ahead and participate because I love to see what you guys think about these stories, crypto world, the investment market world, as well as a bunch of other things. So if you go ahead and participate, I greatly appreciate it. Also, you can check out the description below. I have a link to my Twitter profile there, as well as some of the others in the XRP community, some of these other outside attorneys that I reference on pretty much a weekly basis on this channel, and their different analysis of the Ripple versus the SEC case. You can go and follow them on Twitter as well. Okay, guys, that's it. I really appreciate you watching all the way to the end, for smashing that thumbs up button, and as always, I'll see you guys on the next video.